Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today I'm going to cover a topic that we're asked about frequently, and that is how to select a team that will design the best KPIs. My name is Simon Crouch, and I'm the Principal Consultant at Rubica for Performance Measurement and Analytics, and I spend a lot of my working career working with teams and organizations to design the best KPIs and working with teams to do that. Like many things, the way we start a process, particularly a design process, can impact the whole life cycle of that product, and it is absolutely no different with KPIs. A key component to a successful KPI design process is a team we build to complete it. If we want to be deliberate in our KPI design, we have to have the right perspectives, the right accountability, and the right collaboration. To frame this topic, I'm going to talk about a few measure design formats that don't work. The first is actually management prescribing the measurement. When this happens, teams do not feel a connection or have an understanding behind the measures or what the measures are working towards, and the result, they don't really have a buy-in to it. What they also see the measures as is a rod for their backs potentially, and not actually as a useful tool to improve. So we actually lose the purpose of the measures as a byproduct. The second format that tends not to deliver the best results is brainstorming. When we brainstorm, we're reliant on the best idea that occurs to us in that particular given time. It's not a deliberate process that gives us the right feedback and that we know will give us the right feedback. Another risk when we brainstorm measures is that it can be influenced by our own bias, such as how we've always done things. Another issue that can arise from brainstorming is actually our thinking can be undocumented as well. So it might mean something to the people who are involved. When we're trying to get our colleagues involved with it, we don't really have anything to share with them that gives an understanding of how we got to where we got to. The third format that doesn't work is when measurement design is seen as a data capability and is owned by a team such as the BI team. Data capability is absolutely critical in measurement and standing up measures, but they shouldn't be the owners of the measurement process itself. When we have that, what we lose is the ownership to the measures from the team who are responsible for actually moving it. What we can also get, another risk of data capability owning measure design, is actually we get measures based on the data we have available and not actually the feedback that we need to evidence our progress towards achieving the results that we're setting out to achieve. The final measure design format that doesn't work is when measures are defined by project management teams. Project managers have a difficult job of completing tasks on time, on budget, and projects actually usually close down before we've achieved the outcomes itself. So measures can risk becoming the milestones of progressing activity and not actually achievement of those outcomes. So we actually need teams who are responsible for the outcomes and work past the end of those projects to be responsible for the measures and the results that they contribute to. Like all things which have a purpose, it requires deliberate design, and measures have a purpose. And so to design the purpose, we need to think about how we're going to use those measures, and we need to start with the end in mind. The purpose of measures and how we're going to use them. The first is actually understanding performance. How do we know what to improve or how to improve unless we first understand it? And so with that in mind, measures are a window into our ongoing performance and all the trends. Secondly, we take accountability of the measure and its corresponding result. So this requires buy-in and active ownership, and actually for us to take ownership and say, yes, we're going to achieve this result and we're going to move this measure. Thirdly, we start to use the measure for decision making, and measures become part of our decision making process. So it informs where we should focus and actually gives us an understanding of if we're on the right track, which is when we move on to feedback on progress. The measures tell us that the interventions that we're making to improve performance are having an impact, or if they're not, that we might need to change the way that we're approaching the problem and try other things to move performance in the right direction. The final use of measures is actually evidence that we've achieved what we set out to achieve, but also as a learning tool as well. We can use the measure to learn what went well and what we might do differently next time, so we can take that into our next performance improvement initiative. With that in mind, we're trying to answer 5 critical questions when we're designing our measures, designing the right KPIs. The first is the purpose of measurement. So how are we going to use our KPI as a team? Actually, what we find in most organizations is the way that teams design KPIs or use them can differ between different teams. We inherit the way our team has always used KPIs. So what we want to do is set a clear purpose and shared understanding of how we're going to use the KPIs. The second question we're asking is around strategy and what results we need to achieve to improve performance. That gives us a clear focal point for our measure design process. We then move on to the evidence, and actually the measure providing evidence that will make us believe that we're moving in the right direction. The fourth question we're asking ourselves in the measure design process is it actually feasible to implement and present the measures to the team? Because if it isn't, then there's no point in actually choosing that measure, and we need to think of other ways to measure performance and get that feedback that is feasible to implement. The final question we need to answer in our measure design process is who is going to take accountability for moving the measure and as a byproduct achieving that result. There's no point having a measure unless someone is going to take ownership of moving it in the right direction. To get to this point and to have the right team, we need a cross-functional capability, and we need to have 4 distinct roles in our KPI design team. The first is a leadership role. Leaders are usually either responsible for setting direction or they're accountable for the performance improvement and its measures. What they can provide is a clarity on the strategy and the intent of what particular goals mean, the problem that goal is solving, and the benefit that it will deliver to the organization and to the team. So leaders involved in this process can provide that clarity. What we're also doing is when the leader is in the KPI design process, they're getting an understanding of the measure and its purpose. And as a leader, they are normally making decisions using those measures. So they're starting to get an understanding of how they will use the measure as they go through that design process. The second role that we're looking at is the subject matter expert. Most successful performance improvement initiatives usually involve like a high leverage solution. We're looking at maximum our return on investment with minimum amount of effort. Subject matter experts are usually the best place to identify those changes and know the possible impacts very, very quickly. They are critical in being able to articulate the measures to their own teams, and teams have confidence because they are the subject matter expert. But if they're saying it's the right measure, then it is based on an understanding of the problem, of the process, and what they need to do to get there. They also have a good understanding of what has worked and what hasn't worked before. So as you're going through your measure design process, they'll be able to tell you measures that they may have tried before that didn't work, but also be able to bring in their expertise and experience on things that have worked in the past or thinking around problems in certain ways. So subject matter expert really provides that knowledge base for us to build off, not only to design the right measures, but also to plan the right performance improvement initiatives as well. The third role we need is a data expert. As we talked about before, in a lot of organizations, the BI team actually own the measurement process. They are absolutely critical to the measurement process, and what we need from them is their understanding of what data is available, and the feasibility of the measures that we're selecting. But what data experts can also provide are innovative ways that we can pull together data and we can build measures. They might actually have understanding of techniques or ways of pulling data together and presenting data that teams don't have, but would innovate and actually find a new way of leveraging performance improvement in an organization. So data experts are absolutely critical to the process, not from owning the measure, but providing an understanding of what is feasible and what isn't, and also new innovative ways of capturing data and measuring performance. The final role we need is a facilitator, and really you could almost call this the outsider. One of the main reasons we don't improve performance, and I mentioned it before, is we have institutional views based on our own experience. We struggle to see different ways of doing things because we're so embedded in what we currently do. By getting a facilitator in, they're there to ask the dumb questions. Why do we do it this way? Or if we were to redesign it, would we do it in the same way? They're there to challenge the way that we're doing things and our institutional biases, and actually use that challenge to try and get the best out of the leaders, subject matter experts, and data experts. So we don't only have better measures and more objective measures, but we're also looking at doing things differently and leveraging performance improvements in ways that we might not have thought about before. When we have all four of those perspectives, we have the right conditions we need to design the right measures that feed back on our progress to achieving our goals, but also the right perspectives to start the process of designing performance improvement initiatives that will then move that measure. Beyond that, and outside the KPI design process, our cross-functional teams become our change champions. They go out into the business, they can provide clarity on the measures, they can talk about the process they got to select those measures, and start to build buy-in in the organization so that the teams start to take ownership of the measures, take accountability of performance, but also use the measures in the way that they were designed to be used. So our cross-functional team become our change champions. With that in mind, we're looking for a smaller team with enough expertise and accountability with those four perspectives, and also the mandate to make decisions on behalf of their colleagues. And they're also small enough not to be bogged down with the different agendas that might be at play in larger teams. So to summarize the key points of what we talked about, KPI design needs to be cross-functional to get the right perspectives and expertise. So we're looking for all these different perspectives that will add something to our design process, and we're getting them to work together to get the best result at the end. We need to start with the end in mind and actually how we're going to use the measurement, and then we're looking at a deliberate design process to achieve that end. There are then the four perspectives that we need to design the best measures. We need leadership who can provide clarity on the strategy and also start to take ownership of the measure and use it in the way that it's been designed. We need subject matter experts who can provide insights into the way that a process is operating or a division is operating, and also think of new ways of doing that. We need a data expert who can tell us what is feasible and what isn't, but also maybe give us suggestions on innovative ways of doing things using technology. And we need the facilitator or the outsider perspective to challenge the team and the biases and ask the dumb questions of why do we do it this way? Once we have that team then becomes the change champions. They can start to build buy-in within the organization and start to actually get teams and processes in place to start moving that measure. If you found this topic interesting, you might also be interested in another one of our articles, which is 5 ways to build a high-performing team that cope well with pressure and change. There's a free guide that you can find on our website, www.rubica.co.uk, or if you email us at hello@rubica.co.uk, we can email that over to you, and again, it might be some useful insights that help you on your measure design process and pulling together the right team. You can also follow our LinkedIn page where we share insights on topics like this, on transformational change, on performance measurement, and also on cultural issues. Or you can follow us on Twitter at Rubica_UK. Or you can also reach us on the contact details on the screen now. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found it useful and insightful, and it provides some kind of clarity if you're looking to pull together a team to design your own measures. And of course, if you have any problems or you want to discuss this further, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can answer any questions that you have.